The Treasury's decision to pump an extra £2 billion of taxpayers' money into recession-hit PFI projects is throwing good money after bad, according to the public sector union Unison. We'll be hearing from them in a moment. But first, our chief economics correspondent Hugh Pym sets out how PFI has run into trouble.
Under the private finance initiative, the money to build and run, for example, new schools and hospitals is raised entirely in the private sector. Education and health authorities, in effect, lease the buildings and equipment, and after contracts lasting 25 years or so, ownership of these assets usually is handed on to the public sector customers. Around 700 deals have been signed altogether, with investment totalling around £50 billion. So what's the snag? Well, like any mortgage, those monthly payments stretch some way into the distance. The public sector is saddled with those outgoings for decades, and we won't know till the end of a project's lifespan whether it's proved to be better value than conventional procurement methods. And then came the credit crunch. Most of the institutions which had bankrolled PFI lending melted away. There was a serious danger the programme would grind to a halt. And so HM government had to step in. The taxpayer will be providing up to £2 billion of loans to PFI projects per year. The critics piled in. What's the point of a private finance initiative, they ask, if the government has to fund it? Why not go back to traditional public sector construction and management of projects? The Treasury argues this is a temporary measure, lasting only as long as the credit markets are seized up. The loans are on commercial terms and will be offloaded from the public sector books as soon as market conditions allow it. The critical questions won't go away as long as the government keeps pump-priming PFI. Opposition parties say if elected, they'll review the whole thing. But nobody can deny the scheme has accelerated a major programme of public works after years of underinvestment. At a time of severe fiscal austerity in the years ahead, governments may need all the private money they can get if they're going to get another wave of new schools and hospitals.
Hugh Pym. Well, Dave Prentice is General Secretary of the Public Sector Union Unison and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why do you think that the government should not have put this £2 billion loan in?
Well, we've had the private finance initiative since 1997 when the Labour government came back into power. And as your person before me said, it did accelerate some building, hospitals and schools, and that was a good idea. But there are probably more than the £50 billion that was just referred to invested in these projects. We believe it's in excess of £64 billion. And the thing that we're saying very strongly is it's not value for money for the taxpayer. Because we now know that the cost of that £64 billion to the taxpayer over the 30-year life of projects will be £217 billion. And in 1 year alone, 2017, the Treasury will have to pay back £11 billion in the cost of these schemes before it even thinks of providing public services. We were told at the time that all the risk would be provided by the private consortia. There would be no risk to the government, and we actually asked at the time if one of the consortia goes out of business for any reason, lack of funding, would the government pick up the bill? And we were told no, it would prove that the system was working, because if one went out of business, another private consortia would be expected to pick up the risk. And clearly, as soon as a problem, we're now bearing the risk.
But can you know now whether it's value for money or not for the taxpayer? Will we not have to wait until the end of the project, until it's equivalent, effectively like a mortgage, until it's over?
We have known since day one that it was not value for the taxpayer. What it was an accounting mechanism to enable the government to say that this money was borrowed beneath the line.
But these are schools and hospitals that would not have been built but for the PFI.
But we have built them at an extortionate cost. And the point that I'd put to you, if you were buying a house, it's like you buying a house and paying for it with a Barclay card. The cost of the interest payments are enormous. Hundreds of thousands of workers were pushed out of their employment with schools and hospitals and into private companies.
OK, so what would you do now? What should the state be doing now?
Well, we've got to build for the future. We've got to move out of recession. There has been much talk about public building projects. We're saying if you use the private finance initiative, you will make matters far worse. The £2 billion that's been put in isn't a one-off payment. Even the consortia, the private consortia, are saying that this is now ongoing. And we should be looking at more traditional methods of building, design and build, and then make sure that we monitor those contracts properly.
But what about those that already exist? What are you saying should happen to them?
Well, there's got to be a phased pulling back on a number of these contracts. They're totally inflexible. You talk about building a school, you contract to have 30 desks in a classroom. If an appeal, the council wants to send another child into that class, they've got to renegotiate the agreement with the private consortia to get the extra desk. It's as inflexible as that. We're saying that we've got to look at what is being provided. We've got to start pulling back on what we call the soft services, cleaning, catering. There will all be massive charges to the schools and hospitals. They've got to be brought back in-house. And slowly but surely, we should reduce our reliance on PFI. But the point is, the real point is, even if we do pull these schemes back in-house, the private consortia will make a killing because they've wrapped up these contracts, and the public sector and the Treasury, they've allowed it to happen.
Dave Prentice, thank you.